What's the craziest thing you've seen unfold live on television before it could be taken off air censored? When I was around 7 years old in Panama City, Florida, 2 teenagers hacked into the local news feed. We were in the living room watching the news and it started to break up and then went to snow. Before my dad could get up to mess with the rabbit ears, the signal resolved to show 2 kids in a bedroom looking at something off screen. Then they looked at the camera. Once they realized they were on live TV, they started screaming and hugging each other and jumping around yelling, "We did it! We did it! Ah!" After a few seconds the signal resolved and went back to the newscaster, who apologized for the disruption. Then they just went back to reporting the news like nothing happened. That's actually kind of cute, haha. After Hurricane Katrina, the people stuck in snow at the stadium and gathered on a freeway overpass dying of thirst and hungry as heck. News saying the government didn't know where people were so they couldn't drop food and water was surreal because the news crews literally had the people on TV with captions of their locations, but nope, both local and federal government couldn't figure it out. My unit from the Marines at the time was amphibious. We got recalled from a long weekend to drive to snow from SoCal. We started packing to go and were told to turn around, the National Guard would be handling it. So we sat in the barracks and watched them sink trucks in the water trying to get through. When I was a kid, TV shows were interrupted all the time for high-speed chases and police standoffs. One time a helicopter was tracking a guy who was driving through a field. The driver hopped out of his van with a shotgun. The reporter was telling the helicopter to pan away from the shot, but they didn't. The driver then put the shotgun in his mouth and blew his head off on live TV. The camera cut and came back to the in-studio reporter, who had a defeated WTF look on his face. I swear this led to less situations like this being shown on TV. That time Randy Johnson vaporized a bird with his pitch. I was at a sports bar with my parents and half paying attention to the game when I saw the ball explode into a big poof of feathers. From Wikipedia, after the pitch hit the bird, the ball was ruled dead. The bird was also ruled dead. OMG. I was watching a live broadcast in Texas. The reporter was saying that every year the police have to burn all of the drugs that they seize in all their drug busts. It was mostly huge piles of marijuana. Probably a 10-foot high or so pile. The reporter was in the foreground and she mentioned that most of the police were off duty and volunteering to be there so that the blaze wouldn't get out of control. So all these police and this pile of weed are in the background and it is lit as the pile starts roaring into a big bonfire. Even I could tell that they were standing way too close to it. At least 30 or 40 police officers all standing really close to this bonfire with their backs to the camera. So this reporter decides to ask one of them a question and walks over and taps one of them on the shoulder. This high AF police officer turns around as this reporter is asking him something and he looks directly at the camera with these squinty red eyes and goes, "What the frick?" When I was a kid I was watching the news and saw some people in Sarajevo, I think, being pulled off the back of a truck and shot. Teenage boys and men. Never forgot it. It was daytime and I think it might have been live, the BBC or something, but it has stayed with me ever since. I used to live near a lot of Bosnian refugees who were then school kids. All of them had PTSD and or depression. They had seen their dads and older male relatives murdered while their moms and older female relatives were raped, or they experienced it too. That war was pure heck for the survivors. In the 90s, MTV was on in the background, and downtown Julie Brown was hosting some sort of pool party weekend thing. They were going to commercial, so as she was talking to the camera, saying what was going to be going on after the commercial, some dude started getting closer and started grinding up against her just as she was done. And before they cut to the commercial, she pushed the dude off her and she yelled, "Get the frick off of me." It wasn't so crazy as much as the impact of it was to television, but the Janet Jackson boob was so bizarre. It seemed completely planned and everyone was unsure as to what exactly was supposed to happen, but it seemed like something that wasn't supposed to. It was all very puzzling and then the controversy started blowing up. I didn't see it, but I remember reading all about Earnhardt falling to his death on live television. If I had been watching, that easily would have been the craziest thing I've ever seen, along with the saddest and absolute worst. When Henry Surtees was hit and killed by a wheel mid-race in the Formula 2, it just happened so quickly you couldn't process what you'd actually seen. Felipe Massa's accident at Hungary GP in the zeros. You just saw a flash of something that he was nose first in the tire barrier with the accelerator still depressed. He eventually recovered but his eyebrow never moved again. I swear I've seen it but I've never found it again. David Letterman was hosting The Tonight Show and he had a pair of ferrets on his desk. The zoo guy was talking about them and they freaked out and started running around his desk. Their leash got caught in the microphone so they started going in circles, defecating the whole time, even splashing David. They went to commercial and afterwards the ferrets were gone and David was cleaned up. I had never laughed so hard. Oh god. The LA riots were really brutal to watch on television. They tried to not show any graphic violence but sometimes it just happened. You saw a lot of footage of people looting and running up and down streets throwing things and hitting people but nothing really bad until those men caught Reginald Denny stranded in his truck at an intersection. They smashed the truck windows and dragged him by his hair, I think, out of the truck and just stomped the ever-loving crap out of him and the camera never moved. It was a news helicopter shooting down so you could see the entire intersection and it legitimately looked like you were seeing a man beaten to death right on television. And then when you thought it was over there was that kick and you just knew he was dead. You just knew no one could survive that and it was so upsetting and terrifying to see that kind of unbridled violence take place live right in front of you. And then came the helpers. A few men. One of them, a very large black man, came to Denny's rescue and the attackers scattered like stray, vicious dogs and they helped Denny. They saved his life. It was only a few minutes but until 9/11 it was one of the most dramatic things I'd ever seen on television. I wish I could provide the link, but it was a NHL game and one player fell and his skate cut the jugular of his opponent. Blood squirted out like a hose, staining the ice, sending him immediately to the locker room and a full recovery was had. When I went to look it up the next day, I clicked on the first thing without checking and ended up with my first computer virus. Apparently, sick fricks like to frick with other sick fricks looking up someone else's demise. Lesson learned. The team doctor ran out there, reached into the wound and held the artery shut with his fingers. I watched the infamous Beyonce Hit the Best Music Video of All Time Kanye moment live. I wasn't totally paying attention to the show, like I watched Taylor Swift's name read out and went back to looking down at my laptop. But I do remember glancing up from my laptop and seeing Kanye West walking up to the mic and thinking, okay, is he like on the album too? When he started "Yo Taylor, I'm really happy for you," I was like, what is he doing when he finished? My mouth was wide open. I couldn't believe it. I was never a Taylor Swift fan but my god did I really feel for her in that moment, and was so angry at him on her behalf. I kept watching to see if they would acknowledge it or throw him out but they didn't. Props to Beyonce though, when she won her award later on she graciously gave up her speech to allow Taylor to come back to do her speech. Watching the whole Academy Awards read the wrong envelope Moonlight La La Land Best Picture mix up live was pretty wild too. I remember that, because the moment they announced La La Land, it felt like the show was over and it was time to pack it up. But the TV was still on, so everyone is just gathering their coats and bringing their wine glasses to the kitchen and calling their Lyft to say they'll be home in 10 minutes, and then suddenly something is happening on stage. Lots of other answers on here that are the same as what I would say too, but one I haven't seen is Dale Earnhardt SR's death in the last turn of the last lap at Daytona. It was crazy because it looked like such an innocuous crash. Even watching live, it didn't seem like a big deal, and so shocking when we learned he had passed away. I really enjoyed rooting for the number 3 car. After that my interest in NASCAR pretty much dwindled and went away. You know that everyone on his team that constantly pestered him to wear his neck brace over the years had to have known as soon as he hit. I, at the time, assumed all drivers had to wear them, and also thought the crash wasn't too bad. Knowing now that he never wore one, it changes things completely when seeing the crash. Anton Hubert's fatal crash in Belgium last year. The amount of carnage and debris from the cars on the racetrack was so shocking, but I was so used to seeing drivers walk away. Learning he had died shortly after was heartbreak. The reporters reporting live on 9/11. Covered in dirt, crying, swearing, telling it as it was, utterly terrifying. I would have never considered recording something so horrific, but now that it's all gone I wish I could go back and see that raw humanity again. Hanging out with some friends at a bar so we could watch the UFC on a giant screen. And then seeing Anderson Silva's leg snap in half like a twig from really up close was something. And then about half a year later, Tyrone Spong does almost the exact same thing at Glory. Also saw that one live. I have a hard time watching leg kicks getting checked now. I'm still always afraid the leg will snap. My dad and I were watching a news interview with a scientist who studies the brains of serial killers. He was talking about how the MRI scans of people who are psychopaths show different activity, and they had a comparison image of 2 brain scans on the screen to show the difference. At one point the reporter says, "Wait, I'm reading here that this is actually your brain," referencing the example of the sample psychopath brain. The scientist just responds with, "Yes, that is correct." No explanation. The reporter tries to play off the awkwardness and says something to the effect of them being out of time and transitions to the next segment. My dad and I just looked at each other like, I haven't been able to find the video since. Please send me a link if it exists somewhere. This just happened a month ago. Not sure if it was national news, but the Cincinnati Reds announcer, during the first game of a doubleheader, got caught on a hot mic using a gay slur. I had to rewind it to make sure I heard him correctly. During the next couple of hours, the sports world blew up on the internet, and he, presumably oblivious, finished calling the first game, then started the second game. Then around the 4th inning, he faces the camera and gives an apology for what he said, told the viewing audience he might never be back, and during his apology, a player hits a home run. And he calls the home run during his apology, and then he was gone forever. Not exactly an on-air suicide or whatever, but it was an incredibly bizarre situation. Not exactly an on-air suicide. Definitely qualifies as career suicide. The weirdness was furthered by having to call a home run in the middle of his apology. Watching the luge athlete from Georgia lose control and run off the track in a practice run during the Olympics. It didn't look super gruesome on TV, but they showed the footage and you just immediately knew he was fricked up. He was going 90 miles per hour. Zero body protection. I was pretty young, so it was just a crazy example of our own mortality. RIP Nodder. ETA, I guess it wasn't censored, but it was the first shocking death footage I was exposed to on air. The Louisville basketball player who broke his leg on live television, or Gordon Hayward breaking his ankle during the first game of the season a couple years ago. Chris Benoit's tribute from WWE before he was found guilty of killing his family. As a longtime wrestling fan, Benoit was one of my favorites, and that entire week was a roller coaster ride for me. First, I hear that him and his family passes away. Then WWE does this tribute show. Then you see the heinous crimes Benoit did, and after that, WWE erase him from the company like he never existed. Left me sad, confused and angry. Mine's pretty tame compared to a lot in here, but as one of those horse crazy girls, Barbaro trying to run on a broken leg was pretty brutal to watch. I think that was a lesson to me that sometimes bad things happen too fast for a grown up to be able to shield your eyes. I watched 8 bells die on the TV at some freaking fast food place outside Six Flags Magic Mountain. Freaking terrible day. I was at the NY Rangers game when Lundqvist got hit in the throat with a puck. People who saw it on TV told me later that there was an injury commercial break, but there was nothing for those of us actually there. I've never seen Madison Square Garden as quiet as I did that night. You could have heard a pin drop. Everyone was just in shock at what happened and was holding their breaths while he was laying on the ice motionless. Place erupted in applause when he finally got up. Many years ago, my local TV station would do a live 60-second spot about an hour before the news. You know, here's the stories we're working on for 6. Stuff like that. Anyway, the spot starts, the anchor mispronounces her line, got a case of the giggles, and they had to end it early because she couldn't stop laughing. There was an episode of Just Shoot Me during the late 90s about an animal puppeteer guy who's hot for Gina and makes a Gina giraffe puppet that resembled her. During the end credits, a mare puppet reads a statement. I recently engaged in an affair with Gina Giraffe that was improper. In fact, it was wrong, and I deeply regret it. I hope we can all put this behind us and get on with the business of running Magic Town. It took me a minute, but finally realized they were spoofing Clinton's confession about Monica Lewinsky. Also watched the repeat a few months later waiting for it, but it was suspiciously removed. That was probably just the syndicated edit. They cut out a few minutes to squeeze in a couple more commercials. End gags like that get cut a lot. As I watched the World Series parade in 2008, Phillies second baseman Chase Utley got to the microphone. He was like, "World champions, world fricking champions," but it was live and not on a delay. Same with David Ortiz in Fenway after the Boston Marathon bombing. Not on a delay, and his now famous "this is our fricking city" remark. It's obviously less graphic shocking than a lot of the other things in this thread, but watching the Oscars live in 2017 was really crazy. I felt something was off when Warren Beatty was hesitating to read the name from the envelope, and seeing the producers running around after that and then the guy saying there was a mistake and Moonlight won. That was a really wild ride to end the ceremony, haha. It was the night of the Tiananmen Square massacre. I was home that night nursing a sprained ankle when news coverage came up on CBS. The surreal view of the soldiers with their AKs pointing forward walking among the flames was only surpassed by Dan Rather delaying Chinese officials trying to shut him down while his production crew was transmitting the video to New York. One of the few times I ever really admired the man. I accidentally saw the video of Ronnie McNutt shoot himself with a shotgun on a Facebook Live. It happened a little over a week ago, I think. He was streaming and just suddenly took out a gun and shot himself from under his neck, so he literally exploded on screen. It almost looked fake because it was so gory. Anyway, some sick people thought it would be funny to put it out on TikTok and Instagram so children will see it. They disguise the video by making the first 3 seconds or so of like a cute animal or a meme or something, and then it suddenly goes to McNutt shooting himself in the face. Somebody sent me that video yesterday with no warning. At first I thought someone threw something at his face, and then I realized, OMG. During the 9/11 attack, all the news channels were basically showing any video they could their hands on showing the action. One channel showed a video someone recorded of the second plane hitting and said "Jesus freaking Christ" on live TV. Then the newscaster had to apologize for the language. In fairness, that was a situation where language like that was absolutely warranted. Saw Pennsylvania's Treasurer Bud Dwyer commit suicide on live TV. He pulled a huge pistol out of a manila envelope, put it to the roof of his mouth and pulled the trigger. When he pulled out the gun, people were screaming "No Bud, no Bud." As soon as you heard the bang, he was on the floor. Didn't even see him fall. It was that fast. He had been found guilty of a fraud scheme involving government contracts. He contended, right up to the minute he killed himself, that he was innocent and had been set up by the governor. Nothing gruesome like some of these, but the Houston flooding during Hurricane Harvey. A reporter was live talking about how flooded the underpass was, and during this, a car drives straight past him into the water. At least 6 feet of water, probably more. The reporter looks totally shocked at the camera and then runs into the water and saves the man from the drowning in his car. There were actually a lot of heroic reporters during Harvey. Southern Ontario here. When a teen in the 70s, we got about 4 Canadian TV channels and at least 5 from south of Lake Ontario, mostly Rochester. Late weekend nights were filled with advertising from the House of Guitars. Legendary commercials for stoners by stoners filled the air. I saw my first televised titties on one of their commercials one night, and then the station went dark. Not sure, but I think it was during Wolfman Jack's Midnight Special. Trivia question. Clap for the Wolfman was a hit song. Can you guess who recorded it? I saw what you did there. Jarvis Cocker pulling a Mooney in front of Michael Jackson at the Brit Awards was pretty funny. Madonna and her cape was a second funny one. This news lady doing a report on how dangerous weed is immediately stopped, looked at the camera, said "FK it, I quit," and walked out. Now she owns a very successful weed store. Or the weather lady who had to cover up her shoulders because men kept calling in, saying it was inspired. Good news is that the news anchors dragged those men through the mud. The woman who said "I quit" was the president of a pretty big legalized marijuana organization, and the news channel was unaware if I remember right. She finally got fed up with everything. The tragic death of Aussie cricketer Philip Hughes by a bouncer, bowled cricket ball, to the neck. The footage at the exact moment went to TV and in hindsight it was absolutely shocking. Vale PH. That was horrific. I only heard that night on the news, but the replays were sickening to see. Seeing it in real time would have been surreal. As a kid, I saw the dude that robbed a bank, but I believed he was forced to do it, with a bomb locked around his neck blow up while kneeled in front of the cop car. Great doc made about that called Evil Genos. One of the Spice Girls was on a morning show with Reba McEntire and she complimented and then imitated her accent and said I am white trash in that southern drawl. The wide-eyed looks of the guest hosts and a sudden cut to commercial. For the life of me, I can't find that crap anywhere. This is one that's pretty specific to Australians, but we had a show about our type of football called, funnily enough, The Footy Show. It was one of the highest rating shows in the country, so this had probably hundreds of thousands of viewers. Two of the long-standing panelists are former legendary players Sam Newman, who at the time would have been in his 50s 60s. It was the early mid-2000s I think, and Shane Crawford. Long story short, Sam had been talking mad crap for the entire episode to everyone including Crawford, and at one point changed his outfit into a jersey and shorts for a bit. He stood next to Crawford while continuing to argue with another panelist, at which point Crawford pantsed him on live TV. Now, this revealed the briefs Sam was wearing underneath. You could see Crawford thinking he's not been humiliated enough. Frick it, and pantsed him again, pulling down the briefs and showing the entire country a 60-year-old man's rather small dong. Side note, if you ever want to Google what a piece of crap Sam Newman is, feel free, it's a good read. On Fox, they were following a car chase. Helicopter stayed right on the car as he went off-road. Cops backed off. He pulled over. All the while Shepard Smith is narrating. He's pulled over. He's getting out of the car. He has something in his hands. Stop filming. Cut away. Cut away now, and the guy shot himself right there. Live on Fox. I think they stopped filming car chases after that. Theresa May giving a speech on how strong and stable her government is while in the background her party's logo falls off bit by bit. Right after Kobe Bryant died, the local news was showing clips of him playing basketball while reporting on it, but it was clips of his worst plays, missed layups, bad passes, air balls. I remember the first footage coming out of Christchurch during the live broadcast after the earthquake of the 22nd of February, 2011, in which a woman was being helped away from a collapsed building by some people with what I assume to be a chunk of her scalp hanging from her hair and blood running down her face. The camera turned and her brother was being pulled up from the rubble and carried off, very obviously dead. They replayed that for a little while, but now all the stock footage is of the woman. Second one would be a plainclothes police officer watching a car drive up to the cordon in the first couple of hours after the mosque shootings. Also Christchurch, the 2010s was not kind to that city, and the officer began to raise his rifle to the point where he was about to fire into the car before it turned around and drove off. First and only time I've ever seen a police officer aim an assault rifle and almost fire into a car on live television. What's a reason an actor or actress has been written out of a TV show that I probably did not know about? In the 4th season of House, MD, where House started with 30 trainee doctors and fired a few people every day in the show, even the actors didn't know who was going to be around on the next week's episode. The writers were making up decisions about which character would get fired in show at the last minute, so the actors didn't know if they'd remain on the show or not until the end of a week of filming. The ultimate tryout. Tommy Chong left that 70s show because he went to jail for 9 months for selling bongs. In jail he was cellmates with Jordan Belfort, as portrayed by Leo DiCaprio in Wolf of Wall Street, and Chong was one of the major influences convincing Jordan to write his book. Tommy Chong would later reprise his role as Leo on that 70s show after getting out of jail. Arresting Tommy Chong for selling bong seems like going for the easy target. Not sure if it technically counts, but Damon Wayans was allegedly fired from Saturday Night Live during the show Between the Open and the Goodnights, because, sick of playing underreconciled characters, he came out for a sketch and played his bit part as an extremely effeminate man without any prior indication that he would. There's been a lot of people blacklisted and or fired from SNL for ad-libbing. Remember when Maud Flanders died via a volley from a t-shirt cannon brigade? Maggie Roswell, the voice actress for Maud, got into a payment dispute with the show. She lived out of state and had to pay for her own flight to LA and wanted a raise to compensate those expenses. The show found it cheaper to just kill her off. That ruined the Flanders dynamic for me too. Michael O'Hare, who played Jeffrey Sinclair in Babylon 5, left the show due to suffering from psychological issues, paranoia, hallucinations, etc. They wanted to put the show on hiatus while he sought treatment, but he insisted be written out so the show could go on without him while he got help. The show's creator agreed to keep his condition a secret till after O'Hare's death, at his request. Here's a sad one. In the 1970s, Sesame Street added their first new human character, as in not a puppet. Northern Calloway played the character David. David was supposed to be the hip older brother type. At a time when a lot of inner city kids were turning to drugs, here was Sesame Street providing a more positive role model. He worked at Mr. Hooper's store and was going to college to get a law degree. Later he took over Mr. Hooper's store. Popular character who got less and less airtime until he just disappeared one day. Why? Well, he was secretly bipolar. He took lithium for it, which helped, but also took C, which did not. His mental health continued to deteriorate until one day he went on a rampage in Nashville wearing only a Superman t-shirt. He beat a woman with an iron rod and smashed windows. When he was arrested, he screamed he was David from Sesame Street and they were trying to kill him. He bounced in and out of institutions for the rest of his life. He actually died in a mental hospital in 1990 after a prolonged psychotic episode. Gary Dawden, Warwick Brown, CSI got killed off after getting busted with C. Rory Cochrane left CSI Miami because he got tired of memorizing all the scientific and medical terms in the script. Oh man, I loved Warwick. I never knew why they took him off. Here's one that I'm a bit weirded out that I know. Kyra from the show Reba, Scarlett Pomers, left the show, with the full support of the cast, mid-season in 2005 to get treatment for anorexia. She was 5 feet 2 inches and weighed only 73 pounds. After completing treatment and getting her weight back up and life back together, she returned to the show. She walks into the house and someone asks, "Hey, where have you been?" To which she replied, "I went to get something to eat." Good for her. I always wondered if that was why her legs seemed to bend the wrong way. When Family Matters first aired, it was a spin-off of the show Perfect Strangers, following Harriet Winslow and her husband Carl, a typical middle-class black family, having the kinds of difficulties that normal middle-class black families face. But then, a few episodes in, they introduced the nerdy, obnoxious neighbor Steve Urkel. Before long, Urkel was such a hit that the show eventually became all about Steve and his wacky adventures. Icon was the down-to-earth show about a typical black family doing typical black family things, and in its place was a show about a man-boy genius creating wacky inventions and traveling through time, cloning himself, and having other crazy adventures. In the end, the woman that played Harriet, the entire reason the show existed, remember, quit because she couldn't stand what the show had become. The youngest daughter in Family Matters. Apparently her parents were trying to get more money from the contract, and when they refused to pay they just left the show. The executioner in Game of Thrones has been quietly written out of the show because the actor has terminal cancer and opted to record more music and tour with his rock band. Just as an update, the actor Wilco Johnson is now cancer-free, hoping he will return to the show. If I remember right, the running back from the first season of Blue Mountain State got arrested for drugs, so they swapped him out. Sam Jones 3. He was also written out of Smallville after the second or third season. The Office. He wasn't killed off, but when Ryan went to Thailand he actually was taking time off to film Inglourious Bastards. On the same note, when Andy Bernard went sailing for a while he was filming The Hangover 3. In Angel, Glenn Quinn Doyle was awkwardly removed with a season 1 mid-season death due to issues with substance abuse. He died 3 years later. Fight the good fight, whichever way you can. I love Doyle. Our Atsalo is the funniest line that will always make me sad. On Cheers, Carla's husband Eddie was written off because of some rude comments that the actor made. He had a national radio show at the time and made some jokes about Rhea Perlman's looks and getting combat pay for kissing her. Perlman wanted him off the show. The showrunners agreed and had him killed off by a Zamboni. I love how he's often said he didn't know why he was written off. Mandy Patinkin left the cast of Criminal Minds because the content in the show was getting too dark and morbid for him, so they simply retired his character, since he was old anyway. Mandy Patinkin left the cast of Criminal Minds because the content in the show was getting too dark and morbid for him. That light-hearted romp Homeland, on the other hand. Janet Hubert, the original Aunt Viv in The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, was fired from the show after violating her contract by getting pregnant. She wasn't written off, but she was replaced by Daphne Maxwell Reid in the last 3 seasons. One of the many reasons that Punky Brewster was cancelled is because the star of the show, Soleil Moon Frye, suffered from a condition called gigantomastia, literally giant breasts, and had a breast reduction surgery prior to her 16th birthday to reduce her 38DD to a more manageable size. The actress developed so quickly and so large that the producers felt there was no way they could reasonably portray her character age appropriately. I remember when she was a guest star on The Wonder Years. It was quite noticeable. Orange is the New Black. I don't know if Miss Claudette was supposed to be in S2 because she got sent to Max and it was pointed out if you go there you never come back. The actress actually got in an awful car accident, was, maybe still is, in a coma. She was put into a medically induced coma, but that was in January of last year. She is back to acting again. William Hartnell left Doctor Who because he had arteriosclerosis and his health was declining to the point where he couldn't keep up with a TV acting schedule. The producers came up with the idea that the Doctor could regenerate into a new body because the show was doing well and they wanted to keep it going. Hartnell was apparently the one who suggested Patrick Troughton should take over the role. So ultimately Hartnell's illness inspired the premise gimmick that would make the show, and its hero, effectively immortal. They did an absolutely brilliant TV special on Hartnell, An Adventure in Space and Time, to celebrate the 50th anniversary last year. The original voice actor for Chucky on Rugrats and Dexter on Dexter's Lab quit so that she could take care of her children, I believe. I'm pretty sure she died somewhat recently as well, unfortunately. Rob Lowe left The West Wing because he was supposed to be first among equals in a cast focusing on the White House staffers. The president was supposed to be an occasional presence, not the lead. Lisa Bonet was written off of The Cosby Show for creative differences, but in reality it was because she was in Angel Heart and had done a topless spread in a magazine. It didn't fit with Cosby's vision, so she was fired. Ironically, that kind of does fit with Cosby's vision though. The woman who played Mrs. Langingham in The West Wing left because she was to be given her own show. It never went ahead, but her character was already written off. And she died while filming Desperate Housewives, I believe. The actor who played Peter Gregory, Christopher Evan Welch, in Silicon Valley died of lung cancer only 5 episodes into the show. Haha, the first thing that came to my mind was the rumor that they killed off the dog in Downton Abbey because it was called Isis. They claimed that was never the reason, but the timing was unfortunate to say the least. I also heard that they were going to keep Matthew the whole show, but the actor left and insisted they kill his character. Pazda Lahirta was fired from Boardwalk Empire because during a nude scene her tampon string was showing. She was told to hide it or get rid of it. She pulled it out in front of the crew and threw it on the floor, then told a PA to pick it up, which was the end of her. She is actually a notorious alcoholic, which is the underlying reason. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. She hasn't worked much since then. She can't get her crap together. John Francis Daley played the character Sweets on the TV show Bones. They killed him off because he got hired to direct the new National Lampoon Vacation movie. Till they killed off Sweets. Haven't watched Bones in years. Stuart Townsend, Charlize Theron's BF at the time, was cast as Aragorn in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, but Peter Jackson thought Stuart was too young and they had already started filming. Viggo Mortensen was a last-minute replacement. Viggo wasn't sure if he wanted to take the gig on short notice, but his son was reading the books at the time and convinced him to take the part. There is nothing in the world like the deep love I have for Viggo Mortensen. How gutting would it be to be cast in a film and then being told they don't want you because of something you can't control, then going on to see how well loved those films are. Topher Grace and Ashton Kutcher left that 70s show because they were bored of the long-running show and wanted to move on to other projects. That's why Eric went to college and Kelso got a job in Chicago. Topher got a role in Spider-Man 3. Well, Spider-Man 3 was obviously worth it. Peggy Bundy was pregnant in a later season of Married with Children, and because Katie Sagal was too. When the actress suffered a miscarriage, they kindly wrote into the show that the pregnancy had all been a dream. It would have been too painful for her to have to come to work every day and hold a baby after losing her own. It wasn't miscarriage, it was a stillbirth. So she had to give birth to a dead baby. Heartbreaking. Coach from New Girl left to take another role on Happy Endings. Once Happy Endings was cancelled, his character was reintroduced on New Girl. Chris Langham, who played Hubert in the British series The Thick of It, he was written out of the last bit of series 2 due to him being arrested for downloading child pornography. The way they covered up his absence was by having him in Australia and checking in via phone with Ollie and Glenn throughout the 2-part finale to series 2. Since he was never on screen, they could just have the characters reacting to his non-existent voice over their cell phones. They told us Steve left to go to college. He really left because the actor was going bald. He also had some musical interests he wanted to explore, but the actor said, mostly because I refused to lose my hair on a kid's TV show, and it was happening fast. I missed Steve so much. Blue's Clues wasn't the same after that. I'm pretty sure Chef was killed off on South Park because the voice actor, a Scientologist, had a problem with the fact that Parker and Stone lampooned Scientology in one episode. I'll always miss his cheery hello there, children. I thought he was originally okay with it, then Scientology's reps whispered in his ear and it was over. At least I recall that from interviews. I may be wrong. Phil Hartman's character was written off news radio after he was murdered by his wife. That first episode without him is sad as frick. Dale from The Walking Dead, played by Jeffrey D. Munn. Jeffrey D. Munn was loyal to Frank Darabont in TWD Fiasco in season 2, so when Frank Darabont got fired, he didn't want to act on TWD anymore, so they killed his character. It's pretty apparent too, since his death is completely ridiculous. He's walking in an open field, and he comes across a cow that's been torn open by a walker. He turns around and there's a walker right there. How did the walker get there so fast? They don't run, they only shuffle around. There weren't any bushes, trees or tall grass for the walker to hide behind. He just sort of apparates behind Dale. It's one of the stupider deaths on the show. George, from Grey's Anatomy, was written off. I heard it was because of the fact that his character was getting less and less screen time each season and the actor was upset about it. The character was supposed to go off to serve as a doctor in the military, but he got hit by a freaking bus instead. 007. TV series Avatar: The Last Airbender. The character Uncle Iroh took a brief hiatus from the story plot until the very last episode of the series due to voice actor Mako Iwamatsu passing away from complications with esophageal cancer. You can hear a difference in the voice from all of the previous episodes against the very last episode of the TV series when they brought in a ringer to finish that character's dialogue off. I'm a little late, and sorry if this was already mentioned, but Robert Downey Jr. was written off of Ally McBeal after he was arrested twice for drugs. Peter Petrelli's girlfriend, Caitlin, from Heroes, was stranded in the future because the writing of that season was terrible. Good times. There was a lot of cast conflicts with the show, mainly with John Amos and Esther Roll, who played the mother and father. Both of the actors wanted the show to have a more comedy drama feel towards it, with shows that explored social issues in regards to living in the projects at the time. However, with the popularity of the JJ character, their oldest son on the show, played by comedian Jimmy Walker, the show started to focus more on him. Esther Roll was rather vocal about it, and in an interview, called out the JJ character as being a poor role model for black youths, as he was basically written in the show as a jobless, uneducated buffoon. Eventually, John Amos, after getting into several arguments with Norman Lear, the producer of the show, did not have his contract renewed, and he was killed off on the show. Esther Roll, Eventually getting tired of the show, left and was written off of the show by marrying a man she had been dating in season 4, and then moving with him to Arizona. Dang. Brenda from Beverly Hills 90210 was written off the show because Shannon Doherty was being a demanding self-entitled bee and got fired. Prue Halliwell was killed in Charmed because Shannon Doherty was fired for being a demanding self-entitled bee and kept getting into arguments and having hissy fits about Alyssa Milano, aka the main selling point of the show. You'd think the woman would have learned her lesson at some point, and now she's got a plethora of failed reality shows. Yay team. TLDR. Shannon Doherty plays Shannon Doherty on TV. Not TV, but Crispin Glover. George McFly was written out of Back to the Future 2 because he wanted too much money. Fun fact, the reason George McFly is hanging upside down from that floaty contraption in the one scene where he does show up is because that way it was harder for the audience to tell it wasn't the original actor. Glover later sued the producers of BTTF2 for unauthorized use of his image and won. Blue Bloods, Detective Q Rattler has celiacs and was cut out of many scenes and eventually written out of the show. She's still fighting for back pay and filed discrimination claims with CBS. Spartacus has cancer in real life, hence why season 2 is a prequel and not a continuation of season 1. Detective Stabler wanted too much money on Law and Order SVU. Unfortunately, Spartacus, Andy Whitfield, did not survive his cancer. Jennifer Lien was written off of Star Trek Voyager because at the 11th hour her co-star, Garrett Wang, was named in one of the prominent top 10 hot lists. The writers quickly reshuffled the script and she was let go instead. Someone had to go in order to make room for Jerry Ryan. I'm glad too. Kez was so boring. Kez was boring, but so was Ensign Kim. They had real problems writing danger for the bridge crew. Every bad thing that ever happens to Kim. Serious, Redditors who have been on a game show or any contest on TV, what were some behind the scenes rules that they tell you before they send you out before the cameras? I was a lifeline on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. We were prepped, the 5 of us that were the chosen lifelines, and in this prepping there was no mention about googling. In other words, it was understood that using the 30-second window to Google a question would be acceptable. Many people wonder this, I think, so I thought I'd share. Neat, I figured the one being called would be ready with Google. I was at a taping of The Price is Right. During the commercial break, Drew Carey talked to the crowd a lot and gave a lady a lap dance because it was her 90th birthday. Yep, that hit the spot. Really needed that image in my head. Welcome to The Price is Right, where the numbers are made up and the prizes are lap dances. I went to the taping of an episode of Extreme Makeover Weight Loss Edition. It was the episode in Green Bay. We did a ton of reaction shots to nothing. Okay, everyone turn around and be excited about how amazing he looks, so we all turn around and cheer for nobody. Eventually the person who lost the weight came out, then went back and came out again. It was pretty funny. Also they gave out McDonald's gift cards to the crowd, which was weird because it's a weight loss show. Giving out McDonald's gift cards guarantees a future pool of candidates. I was on Jeopardy a few years ago. Everything seemed on the up and up to me. In the green room beforehand, they even brought in a lawyer and said that he would be there the whole time, and we could speak to him anytime if we had any concerns, even during a taping. The other interesting thing was that one of the contestant coordinators said we're not going to tell you how to play the game, but the stats show that everyone ends up with more money at the end if you start at the top of a category and go straight down, to discourage daily double hunting and random category jumping like that one guy did last season. You could really see the disdain Alex Trebek has for that guy when he jumped around. I auditioned for Wipeout. They were only interested in people that acted literally insane. Are you ready to go crazy? I am already hearing voices. You're hired. I like the Sly SpongeBob reference. I tried out for Jeopardy once. They said they deliberately make the qualifying questions much harder than what you see on the show because 1. They want to find people who are actually smart and not just lucky, and 2. People get kinda stupid when you put a TV camera on them. Cash Cab. It is not completely random. They stopped me on the street and asked if I wanted to be on a show about the city. Me and some friends would go to a location and talked about current events. They set up a phone interview to test subjects' knowledge, really to gauge question knowledge. I was told to arrive at a location to film with a friend. When I got there they said a band was playing on a patio nearby affecting their sound levels. They hailed us a cab and said it would take us to the new location. Boom, lights and cameras as soon as we got in. I'm impressed at how far they went to actually make it feel somewhat spontaneous. You knew you were doing something, but, in theory, the cash cab part was a surprise. Cool. I was in a taping of an MTV show and all of the party and bar scenes were actually filmed during the day. The bars would be too crowded to get cameras, lighting, and cabling around, so they covered the windows in black plastic to keep it dark inside and filmed several days of partying and girls making out with strangers at 10:00 in the morning on the same day in multiple bars. The people inside were just people who they invited to come in off the street and sign waivers. Even the music was fake and added in later. The directors literally sat out on the curb under tents and in front of monitors directing the whole thing. I was a contestant on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire hot seat last year. There are 6 contestants in every episode. We were told that if we even so much as looked at another contestant while we were filming the episode, we would both be disqualified. I will never forget this. Regis is dumb. Regis does not have the answers until we show them after you've locked in your answer. If you are working through an answer and you think he's making faces to guide you, remember, there's as much chance that he's going to help as there is that he's making that face because he's relieving himself. Regis is dumb. Not sure if this was a production assistant telling you this or Regis. I've heard legends he only speaks of himself in the third person. I sat in the audience for Australia's Got Talent auditions. There's only 3 things that were a little odd. Firstly, it takes about 20 minutes between each act to come on and audition in front of the judges. That got old real quick. Secondly, they pre-record samples of audience reactions in order to use it as extra footage. So before any auditions they got us all to give fake standing ovations, moderate clapping, awkward clapping, screaming WTFing. The fat host guy started stripping on stage to get us to really give a good WTF face. But we also had to boo. Lastly, they really know how to make a half-full theater look packed to the maximum. Sneaky cameras. I went to a taping of an Indonesian game show called Airbender. They really had no rules. Everyone fills in a card when signing in. The host draws a card out of a bowl. If you're called up, you go up and play. The game was simple. There's boxes with prizes inside for every day of the year. You either pick your birthday and they open the box for that day, or you spin a wheel. It sounds lame, until you realize the whole show's purpose was to create an underground gambling scene in a Muslim country. There are people betting on which dates would come up, and whether or not someone would pick the wheel or the boxes. I was 12 at that time, won a motorcycle, and my parents quickly sold it away before I got any crazy ideas. I was on Deal or No Deal as the player. Honestly, I have nothing but good things to say about the entire process. The game isn't rigged and they don't try and steer you towards or away any particular cases. The interactions with the host were all genuine, and it was super fun. I didn't know before the day that I would be selected, but I had a hunch because I had a couple of phone interviews with the producers before the day of the taping. They taped 5 episodes in one day, so my surprised happy reaction when I got picked was genuine. They definitely seem to prefer people who have a good story or some sort of angle. Mine was that I'd be using any money I won for an engagement ring. Happy to answer any questions people may have about the day. I won $8,000 on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Backstage, they gave a lot of tips and one serious warning. The tips were use your Ask the Audience lifeline early. It's best if you use it first, and you don't want to use it on the hard questions. The logic is you're on the show and they're not, so it's likely you know more than the people in the audience. The harder the question, the less likely they are to be helpful. Another tip was talk out your answer and listen to the audience reaction. If you say you're leaning toward one answer, and everyone gasps really loudly, you should at least reconsider your answer. A lady who went after me didn't do this and wound up blowing it before she even got to the save point, so she went home with nothing. They also said do not joke around with the final answer phrase. There's a guy in the control booth who is listening just for those words. If he thinks you said it, he hits a button, and you are locked in, even if you were just kidding. Finally, they told us that the questions are generated by a company that has nothing else to do with the production company. That is, the questions are not generated in-house. A company in another part of town comes up with them and delivers them on CDs. The guys in the production booth just grab one off the stack and put it in for each new contestant. They have no idea what's on them. They told us all this to make the point that if you feel like you've somehow been cheated, go ahead and sue. They take these precautions to ensure that if you do try to take them to court, you will lose. Anything else y'all would like to know? I auditioned to be on the show Wipeout. I found out they specifically look for people with something extremely unique about them and or people who are willing to make a fool of themselves on TV. They are not interested in athletic people who might actually have a chance of completing the course. That is what Ninja Warrior is for. Tried out for Legends of the Hidden Temple. They put me on the Blue Barracudas. They tell you not talk directly to Omok because the questions are preset and he will only answer with set responses. It was actually cool to see the dude who runs Omok come out and wave to the crowd. He was just some skinny white dude who does voices. They basically see if you can run jump and if you are too much of a little bee around temple guards. I ended up just playing one trivia game in front of a crowd at Universal Studios Florida and it never made it to air. My little brother cried non-stop because I got picked instead of him, but he was only 7 and I was 11. I was on Video Arcade Top 10 back when they played the SNES. We played Kirby's Dream Course, which is the dopest game ever. We got to try the game for 20 minutes before the show. Other than that they gave us zero instruction. Just turn around and play the game. And kids were great at that. I couldn't tell when they were rolling or not, or when they were introducing the contestants. That's why they usually have some dumb look on their face on TV because they have no idea they are rolling. I don't know how they decided I won and didn't realize I did until I was pulling the ping pong ball from the basket trash can. I pulled some number, not the red, but couldn't tell what I won. Ended up getting a copy of the game, t-shirt, hat, and I got 2 tickets to some show that was for the day before. They swapped them out for an additional game, Score. Ever since I saw the Grumps play that game, all I've heard are good things about it, and to get to play a great looking game for TV would be super cool. Congratulations, man. I was on Millionaire Hot Seat in Australia and they basically gave us one major tip. Don't listen to the host. Apparently everyone tries to read his body language and pick up on subtle clues that he gives them. But in reality he actually has no freaking idea what the answer is until you've already locked it in. Cool guy though. Eddie can't cheat cause Eddie don't know crap from clay. I was on Win Ben Stein's Money. The qualifying written test was tougher than the Jeopardy one, at least at the time. Half of us washed out after that and were sent home. Those remaining played practice games with bells in front of us. We were encouraged to ring in quickly and not worry about right answers. There were people with clipboards assessing us. If you weren't fun, quirky, or somehow sympathetic or interesting, you got sent home. After that, we had face-to-face interviews with staffers. More marks on clipboards. After that, you went home. During the next few days, the show let us know if we were in the contestant pool. We couldn't wear white and had to bring our own makeup if we wore it. Several games were shot in one day. We were encouraged to hang out and get friendly with each other, so backstage wasn't stressful really. It was lots of fun, and we got craft services food, which was nice. There was a long break between the second and third games, so Ben could take a nap. I didn't win Ben's money, but I got to chat with him very briefly. I got a show lanyard, a certificate of completion, and a really heavy clothes presser as a consolation prizes. I also ended up with a side gig test playing game shows, because the Wrangler liked me. Everyone should try to get on a TV game show at least once. It's an interesting process. I was on Family Game Night after being on the right street at the right time in California a few summers ago. There's certain cards you aren't supposed to pick because they have nothing behind them. And when it's your time to pick a game they give you like 6 choices, but in reality they tell you there's only 2 they have set up and ready to go. All of the answers and games are pre-planned. Most of the time the family has already been on the vacation they want, so they can show a picture the following week of them and their destination. It was a really cool game and a lot of fun to see filmed. 3 half-an-hour episodes takes 9 hours to film though. I probably would do it again if I had the chance. It was a fun experience. If you get called up for a game or the Ellen show, do not pick her up out of excitement or give her a bone-crushing hug. We were told she has a bad back. I went to Jerry Springer a while back when it was still in Chicago. On TV it looks like it's a free-for-all, but everything is planned. That random guy yelling from the audience? That's one of the producers. They make it clear you're only supposed to respond to the producer's cues. Also, if there's going to be a fight they kinda freeze frame it and clear the stage before they go at it. It looks seamless after editing, but they actually move the chairs away so they don't trip. I went to a Jerry Springer show in Connecticut and it's so fake. No surprise, but it was funny to see people fighting and then during commercial break they'd like high five and crap. The producers also told us what to ask at the end. I was on a magic show filmed for the CW. Big production. I found myself backstage before the show began, and a magician and a PA approached me because I was the right build for a special jacket he had, and they asked if I would be in the show. I said heck yay, as long as there are no tigers. They told me I would raise my hand when they asked for volunteers and that I had to act really surprised when the dude called me out. Then they would do a little charade and steal my wallet. Once I got up there it had nothing to do with my wallet. I ran around with him for like 10 minutes and tied up his assistant and crap. And then they did this disappearing act with me and his assistant in a tube and she came out tied wearing the special jacket. 'Twas fun. What you don't know is they replaced your wallet with a fake one and still have yours. I went to a taping of the Man Show. They had a prize wheel that people from the audience could spin if chosen randomly. The random winners were all seated last and came in with VIP badges. The first guy who spun the wheel won a weekend at the Playboy Mansion. We all cheered for the guy. Second guy spun and also hit weekend at the Playboy Mansion. We cheered him as well, until they made him spin a game twice more to get something else and he ended up with shave your eyebrows and they did it. We also got a single beer to hold till the end of a couple hours of taping to cheers with but must not drink. I know the magic of TV and blah blah blah, but it just wasn't a fun experience. I was on Let's Make a Deal last summer. First they told us to be wild and crazy and exciting. They asked us interview questions before we even went inside and told us they used that and that they were constantly watching us in the audience to determine who to select for each deal. They told us that when Wayne Brady was choosing who to pick we could go as crazy as we want trying to be noticed, but that if our asses left the seat we definitely wouldn't get picked. On a side note, I expected Wayne to be fun and talkative with the audience, but he wasn't. Every time they cast a commercial, he would run off backstage. About 5 seconds before continuing shooting he'd run back on stage. So there was nothing really fun about seeing him. I was unimpressed. Also sad that I didn't get picked for anything XD. All in all, I found it not very fun. It was exhausting trying to keep up that level of energy for an hour or two. It felt so shallow. Not that I expected otherwise or anything. Let's be real, haha. What if you just sit there and stare the whole time? I was on Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego when I was a kid. I don't remember specific rules, but I was I didn't get to take that sweet butt gumshoe jacket home, and I didn't get to meet the chief. In the 1970s, there was a game show where celebrity couples were asked questions and earned points. Each point translated into dollars for that celebrity couple's cheering section. Our celebrity couple earned the largest number of points in the show's history, so that meant that I and the 99 other people in the celebrities cheering section took home $45 each. In 1977 money, that is almost $200 today. I was at a taping of Whose Line Is It Anyways last year that featured Hubert Royer, Ozzy's son, and some lady that I did not recognize, but as soon as we were seated, the show pretty much started. A friend and I were seated near the guest entrance, so we got to high five everyone, which was cool. The show began really fast and lasted about 3-4 hours, and it didn't seem scripted, but I'm pretty sure they had a rough idea of what was going to happen so they could be prepared. There was a lot of swearing and a lot of improvisation acts that couldn't be shown on TV for very lewd behavior or language, but were probably the funniest acts of all. The best parts are when the actors are out of frame but they're busting up on the side or egging each other on. That said, the last hour absolutely sucks. It's about an hour or so of retakes, so that means tons of clapping and cheering. After 15 minutes your hands become sore. You're tired because it's around midnight, and bored from seeing the same guest introduced 4 times. Was at a taping of a food eating contest. They brought out this big burger and the guy acted like he started chowing down on it. About 4 bites and they turn the cameras off and throw half the food out and start filming again and getting us to chant one more bite. If it's man versus food, my life will be a lie. On the Daily Show with Jon Stewart, before we went into the seating area, they told us to laugh out loud at the jokes. It was upsetting. Oh god, when I went the warm-up guy singled me out and just told me to practice a loud laugh. It felt so awkward. Went to a taping of Millionaire once. They did have a few retakes for random reasons, like if something was wrong the filming. So on a couple of occasions the contestant had to say his answer again and we all had to fake the excitement as if it were the first time, as would the contestant. I work in TV and have given these talks. Generally, if you've made it to the point where you're about to be in front of camera, you already fit a role that production is shooting for, whether it be someone bubbly, someone dramatic, someone interesting, etc. Generally the pep talk before camera is 1. Have fun, 2. Be yourself, 3. Brief compliment, you look great, love the outfit, etc. and 4. Small posture position pep talk, don't cross your arms, don't put your hands in your pockets, face this way, etc. 5. Is a general rundown of what is about to happen and what is expected of you. And that's pretty much it. Of course this varies from show to show, but like I said, if you've already made it that far, you've already been through the grinder and have been chosen for some reason or another. I worked on a big competition show for a cable channel that's been on for a few seasons. We filmed our finale in public. Basically, out on the street in a major city, so there could have been people watching from the sidewalk when we filmed the big announcement of the winner of the show, with the lights flashing and balloons dropping and the confetti flying and the music and hugging. Which is why we filmed it again, 10 minutes later, with the loser, pretending to be the winner. They've just been on this competition show for a month, worked their butt off, and come in second, and now they had to pretend that they won, so we could fool social media. I felt so bad for that person, having to pretend, while so disappointed inside. Then they brought out 2 other contestants who'd been eliminated weeks before, and made them pretend to win. It was pretty surreal, especially doing the balloon drop every time. I was on the singing bee with host Melissa Peterson. When the show opens it looks like she is picking people out of the crowd who sing the correct lyrics to compete, but really we were pre-selected and flown into Burbank before the show and hung out most of the day in the basement level of the studio, singing the same opening song over and over again to make sure we didn't frick it up when we were on camera. And at the end, when the last person is left and they get to sing the last 3 songs for cash, if they mess all 3 up they get a do-over. The girl who won at my taping forgot and sang the very last song correctly, so she only got a small cash prize. The show is on CMT, so most of the songs are country. I however managed to have to sing a dang Michael Bublé song and was eliminated that round because why the heck would I think to practice a Michael Bublé song? I knew someone who was on Cupcake Wars. A lot of time limits are fake. Most of the time they will tack on an extra 5-10 minutes, and if you aren't done by then it goes on like normal. Also the competition isn't done in one day. It's over the course of 2 or 3 days, depending on the event they are catering. The hunky carpenters are a lie. The competitors have to create their own displays and bring them to the studio where they hold them in a giant warehouse. They may put together parts that are removable just for the video, but they aren't doing any of the original work or design. Oh, and the competitors have to pay for the construction of their display out of pocket. So when you see really crummy looking displays, that means the baker had a low budget. So basically the whole show is a lie, but I like getting flavor ideas from it. The hunky carpenters are a lie. I went to a taping of the Colbert Report. They have a warm-up comedian, obviously, tell you to be really loud when he runs in, and Stephen Colbert did an out-of-character Q&A that was unfortunately really brief. Overall, amazing experience though. How I discovered the National. I got to be in the studio audience of the Bozo the Clown show in 1964 when I was 4 years old. It was very cool to see all the behind the scenes tricks they used to achieve some of the effects for the magic tricks the viewing audience saw. But all I could really think about was how embarrassing it felt to be sitting there in the diaper my mom made me wear because we weren't allowed bathroom breaks during filming. I was on a reality TV show, on cable, for photographers and models that competed against each other for the chance to shoot for a major international publication. What I found most strange was with regard to the interviews we would record immediately after filming a segment for the show. We would sit in a room and a producer off camera would ask us questions relating to what they just witnessed from the control room. However, we were instructed to always answer the question by first restating it in a statement. For example, one time after a photo shoot scene a producer asked me, "You and Jane seem to get along great. Do you think it's normal for photographers and models to flirt during a shoot?" Not only would I have to respond, I would have to respond by restating the question in my answer. Something like, "Jane and I got along great, and flirting during a shoot is totally normal due to the environment and setting," or something to that effect. I found out months later when watching the show on air that they did this so they could interject these recorded statements of me in the middle of the scene that preceded their questioning. So for example, during that photo shoot scene they inserted the clip of me saying Jean and I got along great and flirting is totally normal in the middle of Jean and my photo shoot scene to make it seem like this was something on my mind at the time of the shoot, when in reality this wasn't on my mind and it was merely a question they propositioned to me after the fact, and I was merely forced to respond in such a way that made it seem like the thought originated from me. This happened all the time throughout the whole show, and clearly enabled the producers to make stories and plot lines that weren't actually there in reality. Redditors who have been on a reality TV show, what are some of the off-screen secrets we aren't supposed to know? I worked for a bakery that was on, and won, Cupcake Wars. The premise of the show is to surprise the bakers with a few, more often than not, odd ingredients and see what they're really made of. In reality, we found out the ingredients a few months before the show. Had we not known, there's no doubt we'd have lost. There are definitely people who thrive under pressure, both in performance and creativity, and they have better things to do with their time than crank out cupcakes for Food Network. Tell an unprepared contestant they have 40 minutes to make a delicious cupcake using tater tots and 9 times out of 10 you'll have a middle-aged woman sobbing into her mixing bowl. That lady is usually my mom. Met someone on a plane once who was on House Hunters. After she purchased her new house, the show came and taped her viewing that house. Then they took her to 2 other houses to make it seem like she was going to pick between the 3. In reality, she had bought a house before they even taped the show. Must be why they always get the house they pick instead of getting outbid by someone else. I've known the Long Island Medium's family since kindergarten. A lot of the minor plot is scripted and the house is not in a cul-de-sac like it appears in the intros. A friend of mine was on that old MTV show Next. 1 guy, 4 girls. She was the first date off the bus. She's really pretty and a super cool girl. She and the guy hit it off, and he offered her the second date or whatever. She accepted, but then the producers asked her to get back on the bus because they didn't get a good shot of her coming out of the bus originally. She went back on, waited for action. When she came off the second time, the guy yelled next. I have been to Carlo's Bakery, the bakery from Cake Boss. While there we learned that the wedding they were filming in Italy was completely faked, and they never actually got married. Kind of ruined the whole experience for me. I live 5 blocks away. Buddy is never there unless he's filming a commercial. My uncle played a local Native American historian on Sci-Fi's Goes Mine. He didn't know crap about the Native Americans of that area and only lived around there for about 8 years. He just passed away, but our family got a hoot out of seeing him BS through some TV. I auditioned for The Voice last year and it is a horribly long process. I was at the audition site for more than 5 hours. But the strangest part is that they put you into rooms by genre, even if you don't sing that genre. So an incredibly talented pop singer won't get in because they were placed in a country genre room. It's pretty odd. That is odd. I auditioned for The Voice as well last year and they didn't do the genre thing. We just stood in line for like 6 hours and then got grouped in rooms of like 8 random people. I used to work in reality TV. Almost everything is planned ahead of time. TV is expensive to make and no one has the time or money to make an entire show of real moments. Some shows are more real than others. Cop follow shows are usually pretty authentic. Anything with celebrities is probably all fake. Most dramatic phone conversations are fake. I did voiceover once as a nurse calling with bad news. If you want a free wedding, sign up for a wedding show with a host. They have a reputation to uphold, so they are invested in giving you a good event and you could get a lot of free stuff out of it. Cut. I'm sorry officer, but you were an hour late when Daryl threw his crack pipe at you then dove over the fence. We're going to need him to put his pants back on then shoot the sequence again. Oh, and Daryl, this time when you get taste try to scream a lot more. Really get into the moment. My cousin went on Judge Judy once, sued her ex-BF for something or other, and the producers told her things like, make sure you tell her right away if the other person is lying. Don't wait until she asks you and don't make eye contact with her. It makes her mad. Having seen the show, she knew better and ignored everything they said. She won, but not after being berated by Judge Judy for being a liar even though she had all the evidence needed. I was called to be on a show like that. I bought a lemon car, and somehow a TV show got hold of my court filing. They probably figured it would be dramatic TV since the seller was a friend of the family, but frick that. The last thing I want is to get told off on TV. Finally, I have a story. When I was 14, I applied to one of those home makeover shows, although this show was just a room. First off, all the application process is crazy. First you have to write in, then you have to make an individual video and then a video with your whole family before they finally call you to tell you. They ask if you can set up a camera or something, which totally ruins the surprise. Then, once chosen, you have to leave home for like a week on your own dime. Luckily this coincided with my spring break so I didn't miss any school. At the start I did a consultations with the designers that lasted all of 2 minutes in reality, but took forever to film because we had to keep repeating stuff and kept being asked the same, very leading, questions. They put up all these lights to make the rooms much brighter than they actually are. Also the pieces used to attach the lights are still on our ceiling. Not sure how or why. The entire time I was on camera, I was being told what to do. I was definitely more of an alternative kid, but they put me in this preppy little skirt and braids and told me to be super overexcited about everything. I will say though, the reveal is very authentic. I loved what they did. The sad part though is that because of time and budget restraints, a lot of the amazing stuff doesn't last long. For instance, they made me this huge, beautiful custom desk, but the wood was never finished, just painted, and it started chipping off after like a year. Also my curtains, which I didn't have before, were basically stapled in place and they don't actually move. Overall an interesting experience and hey, I got some free stuff out of it, which was nice cause my family was poor. A friend of mine tried out for American Idol and she said it always seemed like the people wait then they get their big shot in front of the TV judges. In reality it's a ton of steps and hours of waiting to go through loads of intermediate judges who decide if you're either TV material, the insane or terrible people, or actually good enough to move on. I was once profiled on show where they interviewed me on camera and also shot a lot of B-roll, shots of me doing stuff. First of all, the interview lady couldn't have cared less about me until the word action. Then she was all concerned looking and acting like she was my best friend. Camera off, back to business. Then for the B-roll, they made me do all kinds of things to look sad, even though I was not sad at all. They made me, well, not like force me, but you know, wanted me to wring my hands and look off into the distance. They actually said, now wring your hands and look off into the distance. It was clear I was a pawn in their production plans. Didn't care for the experience. I was on a tattoo reality show. It wasn't necessarily planned, but I had to redo some scenes, like the introduction and follow-up interview. Everything else was authentic. I was on Antiques Roadshow, which I suppose is a reality show of sorts. It's actually pretty legit, but considering it's PBS that shouldn't be surprising. The main thing you don't realize is how long you wait in lines. Your ticket has a time on it to help control when you arrive, so foot traffic isn't bad. You get there and wait for about an hour in line. At the front of the line you get your items checked. Each person gets 2, and these tickets direct you to the next line you need to stand in. I had a watch and some art, so I had tickets for the timepiece and Asian art line. After the first hour and a half of waiting, you wait in the main room. Basically how the setup works is that there's a small circle of banners and tables in the middle of the room which obscure the outside where all of the lines are directed. Everything is filmed in the middle of that room. You go through the line, and when you get to the front an appraiser looks at your item. If they like it they go and talk to the producer to see if they'll film it. If they film, you're taken to a small back room where they've got makeup and might make adjustments to your clothing. Like if you're wearing a branded shirt they'll make you change, but they actually advise you to wear neutral clothing if you're coming to the show. Then they do the interview after you sign the release. If your item is valuable they actually have security escort you out to your car. All in all it was pretty efficient and none of it seemed fake. It took a really long time, about 5 hours of mostly standing in lines. I'm so glad to hear it isn't horribly fake. I love Antiques Roadshow. Veneer. My family was on the Food Network for our restaurant once. Pretty much the entire process is fake. The producers faked scenarios so that there could be more drama and suspense in the episode. Even the portrayal of one day was actually spaced weeks apart, having my family members come dressed in the same outfit so that it seemed it was all in the same day. I don't know if any of you watched or remember the short-lived reality show My Life as Liz, but I was on it as an extra for a couple episodes. The first season followed her as an awkward teenager who despises preps and going to high school in Texas. The second season followed her when she moved to Brooklyn, New York to pursue art history in college. This is where I come in. My private art school, Pratt Institute, surprisingly relished in the fact that MTV was going to be filming on campus and even allowed them to recruit extras from the student body. I think all they were thinking about was exposure. What I didn't know is that these extras were cast as her filler friends and the crew was only allowed permission to film outside of academic buildings. The friends that had got chosen let it completely consume them. I also knew Liz personally, and every time she saw me she never remembered my name because I never had a speaking role. Needless to say, I was really disappointed in how fake the show actually was. The majority of it was scripted and it was supposed to show what going to art school was really like. Their portrayal of it was completely unrealistic and the scenes of her in class were shot in a completely different location. It frustrated me to think teenagers were going to watch this and think I want to move to New York and live a life like this. No you don't, because it is nothing like it is on TV. Most extras didn't get compensated for their time either. I'm glad I finally got to get this off my chest. My friend was on X Factor. He says that off camera, all Simon Cowell would do was smoke cigs and do push-ups. Haven't been on a show, but worked in TV. Lighting takes forever. There are literally hours between takes. If there aren't, then the lighting was set up beforehand. That means that the stars have to stand in a very specific location during those impromptu scenes. They aren't impromptu at all. I saw one episode of The Bachelor where the couple decided to make out frick in the shower. It was one of those tub showers with the curtain. Well, the curtain was a translucent white with a purple tinted light behind so that the silhouettes could be seen in the act. This was the worst example of a staged scene I have ever seen in a reality show. I mostly do concerts, but got to do my first movie last year. Got called in as a specialist to program DMX for a dance scene. 2 fricking days for a 15-minute portion of the movie. I was on the reality TV show Wife Swap almost 5 years ago. I was 11 at the time and my mom got switched to Arizona. Anyway, there are really no behind the scenes secrets. Most of it is manipulated in editing to make things more dramatic and twist our words around. But a behind the scene thing that is awesome is they buy you pretty much any food you want. I was on Come Dine With Me, pretty big in the UK, the Basildon all-in-one special. I was the dude who cooked chips, cheese and gravy for shoots and gigs. Dave Lamb, the narrator, doesn't write his own stuff. People will only search your room if you want them to find stuff. Arguments are encouraged, and if anything is missed by the cameras, it has to be played out again a second time. Sometimes the camera crew will prompt you to do certain things at certain times. For example, guests didn't like me cracking my knuckles, which when tapped on the shoulder, I was told to perform. I have a friend who used to frequently see filming of Jersey Shore Live because he was from Jersey. He says that they have scripts hanging above the camera and it's not really real. What is this blasphemy? I was on the show Trading Spaces Family on TLC. If you haven't seen it, basically you switch houses with a neighbor for a couple days and remodel one of the rooms in their house with a $1,000 budget, a designer, and a shared carpenter. On screen, they show just the families working, but behind the scenes there's like 6-10 other people that come in the room to expedite the process. That is, painting. Also, the catering was delicious and delivered right to the kitchen, and I was a fat little kid. Was in a club when Breaking Amish Law was being filmed in Vegas. Real bottom of the barrel reality TV. Anyway, the producers gave them the alleged Amish tons of booze and brought girls over to their table. The alleged Amish danced like freaking idiots and at one point danced with one of the go-go dancer type club employees. It was at the now defunct ACT at the Palazzo, so there were tons of people dressed in shocking and very suggestive outfits. I'd love to give you juicy details, but it was not all that exciting. Signed the release to be on TV and never even bothered watching the episode to see if I made it into the show. Can't be more fake than Amish Mafia. Approximately 80% of reality shows are made in post-production. Entire storylines are created literally from found footage mixed with what is called Frankenbites, which is where interview lines are created from pieces of a bunch of different interviews, so we can make anyone say anything we want. Also, little fun fact, if a cast member is a dong to the field producers while shooting, the editors will back up their team and make that cast member look worse when it comes to editing. Source: I'm a reality TV editor. I was on an episode of a show where people hunt for houses. Internationally, they film the show after the people have already bought the house. They just take everything out and have them walk through it like it's the first time they've seen it. Also, if you're watching and see any personal effects etc, it's automatically not gonna be the house or apartment they get. Producers, by default, pick the winners they want footage. Fairness in competition is not an issue. 2-minute challenge. You won the money in seconds, but it was boring. You can have the money, but do it again. If you win again, pretend like it's the first time. If you lose, pretend like you're devastated. You'll get the money anyway. Your time is running out. Time had already run out, but the contestant was popular with producers. You did it. You did it. You won. Are you excited? You beat the 2-minute mark. Actual elapsed time 4 minutes and 45 seconds. You lost, but it was boring. Try again. If you win and the footage is better, then you get the money. Have a do-over. Our setup has ruined this girl's chances. Should we give her a do-over? Answer: number. She's not fun to watch anyway. A person wins $50,000 in the pilot. The series is shot with a new host. Bring back the pilot contestant again. I don't know if they got the original $50,000 in addition to the money they won in the series shoot. Our lawsuit still isn't settled from the last show we produced. Executive producer: get the cheapest of everything. Cheap props. Don't tell other crew if we buy one group lunch. Make them buy their own lunch. Keep lunch a secret. Cheap production. Cut costs. Drug addict crew are desperate, they will work cheaper. Charter me a helicopter. I don't feel like driving to location in Long Beach. I was on Kitchen Nightmares with my friends and family. We ate on the before day. Nothing at our table was fake, but I don't know about the kitchen scenes. Never watched the episode. We did get our food for free because we complained, though. It was really crappy. The waiter seemed pretty nervous in front of all of the cameras though. Also, they just told us not to look at the cameras when they came by. I did briefly meet Chef Ramsay when I was taking out the trash for the store I worked at, which was next to the restaurant. He was smoking a cigarette. It was pretty cool. I just said, "Hey, chef," and walked away because I didn't want to disturb him. He said, "Hey, back." I was once a referee for WWE. All of the wrestling you see is staged. All of it. As many here have already stated, the reality part is pretty minimal, very heavily scripted. The director would tell us to do things, and if she didn't like what she got, she'd have us do it again. Some notes of interest. They only had one camera, so for competitions they actually started each team at a different time so they could film us starting, then edited it together to look like it was all simultaneous. Same for finish times. The entire season was shot in 5 days, even though episodes released weekly, and they tried to make it look like a whole week had passed. One day they even had us bring a change of clothes so they could shoot 2 episodes. They were constantly trying to get us to badmouth the other teams, but everybody really liked each other. Hours of B-roll footage, and they would only use the 5 seconds where you finally give up and say something kind of vaguely negative after they've been badgering you the whole interview. Serious, people who have been guests on reality shows such as remodeling, weight loss, porn shows, what really went on? My family won a kitchen makeover from the Martha Stewart show. They said they sent us on vacation for the last week of construction, but in reality we stayed home and ate in our basement the whole time. They filmed us driving up the street, had us change our shirts, and then filmed us getting back from the airport. Can't complain though, the kitchen was nice. This one made me chuckle. When I see shows that send families away for a nice little vacation before the reveal, I never doubted it before. I went on a show called The Year of Making Love, where we filled in an exam to scientifically match us up with our ideal partner. It studied our likes, dislikes, and what we looked for in a partner. We all had to drive up to Birmingham or someplace, and there was 1,000 people, 500 women, 500 men, split into genders. We sat on each side of a hall, when numbers would be called up and a man and woman would walk onto a stage, meet and walk off down the aisle. My one didn't show up. Oh god. I was on Homes in the second season. We had our weird cement balls floor replaced with granite. The crew were very nice and almost everything was authentic with 2 exceptions. Work took about 2.5 weeks and they presented it as being a 2-day job, and Holmes didn't do much work on our place. Not for lack of ability, but simply because he was busy as heck. His crew were great and he chipped in and led where he could. We paid for materials but the labor was free. I was on What Not to Wear, AMA. I will say the hours were really long and they don't make you throw everything away. Also, Clinton Kelly was one of the nicest people I have ever met. Went above and beyond to help me get clothes that worked, even staying on off camera at the 15th hour of a day to get the right pants. Stacy was nice too. The weirdest things were the up-close reshoots. If you pointed at anything while being filmed, they'd come in afterward and do an up-close of your hand doing the motion. We learned towards the end to just stop pointing. This was my dad's favorite show, and every time it was one he would say, "See, it's not about fashion, it's about confidence." I was on American Ninja Warrior. All in all, it's legit. The crowd reactions are often from different runs times, the crowd noise may be doctored here and there, the order of the runs may be changed, and the commentary may be redubbed, but that's all minor TV stuff that's expected. Everyone that worked on the show was incredibly nice. It's clearly a TV show more than a pure athletic competition, but that doesn't detract from it in any way. In my opinion, 10/10 would keep watching. The crowd reactions are often from different runs times, the crowd noise may be doctored here and there, yeah, that stands out like a sore thumb. They'll have wild cheering going in the background, but you can see the crowd in the shot and everyone is just sitting there. Honestly hard to unsee once you notice it. My high school was on a couple of episodes of MTV Made. The girl wanted to become more popular and the prom queen. MTV put on a crapload of different events in her name to encourage us to vote for her. What MTV didn't show was that the reason she was unpopular wasn't because she was overweight or in the band or anything, though both were true. She was unpopular because she was a giant bee, like insanely rude and bitchy. Needless to say, she did not win prom queen. To their credit, the show didn't try to reshoot it to make it look like she won or anything. I was on Judge Judy back in 2010. Our case was real and hand-picked by the production team. We had to pull the case from real court in order to go on her show. The decision of who wins and loses is made up before you even walk into the courtroom set. The audience is all actors paid to sit there. Judge was wearing jeans and slippers under her robe. Also, she's incredibly quiet in real life. As in, I had to really strain to hear her. All in all, I got a paid 3-day vacation to LA and stayed in a decent hotel. I also got paid to be on the show, and when I lost the show paid the other guy for me. Pretty amazing, really. I got to participate in a very limited way in Extreme Makeover Home Edition. The one thing that I learned was how little actual useful work the stars do in terms of the building. I am sure it will be disappointing and not at all surprising to hear that Antiques Roadshow is pretty much like it looks. Our dusty crap was not selected for a special segment, but we did have our items appraised. They filmed the segments right out in the middle of where everyone is lined up waiting, so you get to see it unfold. The one thing that they don't show is how much research the appraisers do. I mean, sometimes they'll say on TV I did some research or I consulted with colleagues, but I think most times a viewer might come away with the impression that the appraisers clap eyes on a piece and immediately understand its significance. But generally they have a laptop and some reference books to turn to, as well as memberships on the fine arts auction sites which show prices realized in previous sales. Also, I was a volunteer on a short-lived makeover show called School Pride where they renovated public schools. I worked several days nights at the Detroit area school that they made over. I don't know if it was because the show was new or what, but it did not seem very organized, and a lot of the student volunteers on site didn't have enough to do because no one had a plan for them. I think they must have made a monster effort in the last few days. When the segment aired, they showed some very industrious looking work sessions, and those weren't going on at all when I was there. Nice people, though. I am not sure the producer on site ever got much sleep. Did the home makeover show when it was in Philly. The neighbors make out great. Some of the neighbors were sent away on trips too so we could take over their yards for storage and setting up a cabinet shop. They also received free furniture, and the surrounding neighborhood can go to the hospitality area and eat some free food. But as others have stated, the construction is horrible. They use leaf blowers and hair dryers to get the joint compound to dry faster. After the show aired, the bed that could lower into the floor was permanent disabled because someone could get crushed under it. House was robbed a week after the show aired and the family ended up moving 5 years later, which I heard is the amount of time you agree to not sell the house as a condition of being on the show. I was on a Canadian show called Trading Places. My wife, our 2 kids, and I swapped lives with another family on the other side of Canada for a week. It was actually a pretty cool experience. The producers set up a number of activities with the idea of creating watchable TV, but in the end everything was pretty authentic. For one activity I was entered into a cyclocross race, and the idea was that I was to only do 1 or 2 laps, just enough to grab some footage. I actually kept going, finished the race, and beat 2 of the other racers. The other family is absolutely awesome. After the show we met up and have actually stayed in touch ever since. They even came for a visit last summer. The show was back in 2002, so this was the early days of reality TV. I am sure it's a lot more scripted now. Late to the party here, but I have a relevant story. I live near Detroit and had an old ozone generating air purifier called a Homozone for sale on Craigslist that I had picked up at a garage sale because it looked cool. I got a call from a production company in California that asked if I would be interested in appearing on Hardcore Porn. The shop is only a few miles from my house. For a chance to sell my item, they offered me $50 for my appearance and I could keep any money that was offered by the shop. I decided to accept, so they gave me a date and time to show up. The place was packed because they shoot the whole season in a couple days then fly back to California. First I did a brief interview with the camera outside the shop about what I was bringing and how much I wanted for it. Then I was ushered inside where they took my item and told me to wait until I was called up. After browsing for a while, I was called up by one of the assistants and they brought me to the counter where the main guy Gold, with the ponytail, was standing. We talked for a bit and he asked me about where I was from and explained how the bar touring would work. Once the introductions were out of the way, the cameras go on and he put on his TV character. He seemed like a real nice guy when we were talking but a little sleazy when in character. Mainly the bartering process consisted of him making gay jokes about the name of my purifier and insinuating that I may be a homosexual. He made me an offer for $5 and I turned it down, then went on my way with the $50 from the production company. I don't have cable so I have never watched the show, but my parents watch it and have not seen me on it yet. You know what? I think I remember seeing some sort of ozone thing on the show once. It must have been you, surely. I worked on one of the final Extreme Home Makeover episodes, the 7 and 7 episode where we built 7 houses in 7 days in Joplin, MO after a huge tornado wiped out a lot of the city. The construction crews were all run by local general contractors and their teams donating their own time, which was really awesome. None of the hosts did any of the real work, they just did a few things for cameras. Ty Pennington was a huge D-bag and diva. He only came out of his lavish tour bus for a few minutes at a time to shoot his scenes. The week of the shoot he went and got belligerent drunk at a bar in town and made an ass of himself. Oh yeah, and the house I was working on was framed with 8D nails. I wasn't part of the framing crew. Inspector never said anything. 8D nails are about an inch or two too short to be proper for framing houses. They are 2 and 1/2 inches. Usually not too much of an issue unless it could get hit by a tornado. Oh, in all seriousness, a 2x4 is an inch and a half thick, meaning you could pull out a board fastened with a 8D with your hands. I was on the old MTV show Yo Mama. Jokers keep a piece of paper with the jokes on it in their pocket and they pull it out before each line and memorize the line. The background group had to rehearse several times for the applause and cheers. That show was so stupid that Yo Mama was the only person who watched it. I was a contestant on Survivor, Pearl Islands. For the most part nothing is really scripted, although obviously it's cut way out of order for dramatic effect. I learned you can always tell by the pimples that appear and disappear on contestants from scene to scene. Some people are surprised that we were provided toilet paper and tampons plus a spot to crap and throw away the paper. Which was good because most people had to get up to blast a diarrhea dump at least 3 times a day from eating rice cooked in stagnant filth water. No matter how much they boiled that water, it still tasted earthy and had grains of dirt in it. I was on Made, an MTV show about turning nerds into pickup artists, charming people, whatever term suits your fancy. Well, technically, rather I was at a party being hosted for the main star of the show. My family and I happened to be vacationing at the Atlantis Resort in Nassau, an island in the Bahamas, when we heard about MTV hosting this party, and 15-year-old me figured it would be fun to go. As I walked through the entrance to the party, I saw a pretty girl on a seat in the corner. I asked her what she was doing and she said something along the lines of, "They asked me to wait here." From being at the party and later watching on TV, I learned that this was the girl that the star of the show got to go on a date with. In other words, MTV spoon-fed a date to a guy on a show about how to get to date. I can't blame the girl for agreeing to it. She got to be on TV and all she had to do was go to a nice dinner by the dolphin enclosure with a fat nerd. Not the most exciting thing in the world, but confirmed to me that, yes, reality TV is as fixed as everyone believes. I was a cast alternate for Fox's Utopia. What that basically meant is that I had to be constantly ready to drop everything and join the show to replace a voted out cast member. Here's what I can tell you. The show was pitched to me as a survival show. They wanted to know all my skills and how I would handle dangerous situations. The show, in actuality, was all about getting good-looking people naked in the man-made, fully stocked lake. The cast had electricity by day 3. I would receive phone calls asking me if I've been keeping up with the action and what my feelings were. Knowing full well that they wanted drama, I'd lash out at nearly everyone on the show. They asked me if I could design their e-commerce site better. Yes, this was a survival show, but the group had a freaking e-commerce site to make money. The best thing I got out of the ordeal was a paid vacation to Los Angeles for a week. Got to meet a bunch of wackus and pompous LA executives. Got to meet the guy who created the voice and all that crap. It's 100% as sleazy as you'd expect. My old manager used to own the storage facility that was on one of the really early episodes of Storage Wars. The producers come onto the facility, buy out the units, then proceed to plant valuables in some of them and weird creepy garbage in others. None of the lucky finds these weirdos get on the show are found by chance, they are all plants. What's sad is people think these sudden storage jackpots are real and are trying the real deal, usually shelling out hundreds of dollars for a unit that only has a moldy mattress and crusty 80s P magazines. Oh no, you've been visited by the centipede. The centipede appears only once every 3.8 trillion years. Like this video in 2.1 seconds or forever be uncomfortable. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.